C5 Insight is a Microsoft Solutions partner, helping organizations succeed in the AI era.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another C5 Insight webinar. My name is Haley Batchican, and I will be today's webinar moderator. In this session, we are sharing all about why AI readiness starts with data readiness. Time permitting, at the end, we'll be hosting Q&A, so you can click the Q&A icon at the top of Teams to submit any questions you may have, and we'll discuss them with our speakers at the end. To introduce today's speakers, I have Traci Winter, who is the Senior Director of Business Consulting here at C5 Insight. She has more than 20 years of experience in the Microsoft ecosystem, starting early on at the Microsoft campus in Fargo, North Dakota. She is joined by Tracy Urbina, a Copilot solution engineer specializing in AI workforce transformation at Microsoft, where she empowers teams to harness advanced solutions like Copilot agents to drive organizational efficiency. So without further ado, I will let the Tracys take it from here. Over to you, Traci with an I.
Thanks, Haley. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us. Before I dive in, a quick word about who C5 is. C5 Insight is a Microsoft consulting firm. We've been at this for about 2 decades. We help organizations get more out of Dynamics 365, Microsoft 365, and the Power Platform. Everything we do runs on a simple framework. We call it LUCK. Listen, understand, connect, and know. Listen to the people and remember what they say. Understand the information so you can make better decisions. Connect people to the right platforms and processes, and then know, share, and improve the score together. It sounds simple, but it's the difference between technology that sticks and technology that sits on a shelf. Everything we talk about today is going to tie back to those four things. So why does AI readiness start with data readiness? Here's the thing you have to understand. AI doesn't work in isolation and never has. Copilot doesn't show up to work with its own brain. It doesn't bring its own knowledge or context. It depends entirely on what's already sitting in your environment, your content, records, systems, permission, governance, or even lack thereof. All of it becomes the brain that AI is reasoning from a single time it answers the question. So when we say AI readiness, we're really asking a different question. We're asking, what is the foundation underneath AI? And is it really ready for what we're asking of it? AI, that foundation is what determines whether AI helps people or quietly frustrates them. And that foundation at the end of the day is your data. Here's the key idea I want everyone to hold on to. Poor data foundations become that limiting factor, not your licensing count, not your training plan, even the models you choose. It's the data underneath that decides what's possible. Now, I really want to be clear about something because this is what gets misunderstood all the time. It doesn't mean that it needs to be perfect before you start your AI journey. If you wait around for perfect, you will never start, and your competitors aren't going to wait for you. But it does mean that data readiness needs to be part of it from day one. You can't bolt it on later after rollout, and you can't decide later if it's going to work or not. Copilot is only going to be as strong as the foundation underneath it. That is the end game you want to focus on. So what does that really look like for most organizations? It looks very similar to this. It's chaos, plain and simple. Most digital workplaces are not perfectly organized, and they're certainly not fully governed. Content is everywhere you look, between Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Outlook, old folders that nobody owns anymore, business systems that don't talk to each other or never have. Some of that content is current and accurate. Some of it might even be from 2018 and has been sitting there ever since. That duplicated 5 times content across the systems, some of it mislabeled, some accessible to way more people than it ever should have been. We worked with a client who had a SharePoint site for an old product line. That product itself had been retired for about 3 years. Somehow the site never got cleaned up. The site was still alive, indexed, fully searchable across the tenant. So when Copilot got turned on, that was the first thing that came up when sales asked a simple pricing question. That old pricing sheet came up confident, beautifully written with summaries to go with it. The sales team almost quoted those numbers to a customer before someone had caught it. That's the reality on the ground. Copilot and agents inherit the digital workplace you have already. They don't clean it up first, and it doesn't ask if it's accurate. That's exactly why data readiness matters so much and why we have to talk about it now. So when we say poor data foundations, what does that mean in plain terms? It's not abstract or theoretical. It's 6 very specific things you see every day. Outdated content, inaccurate records, those duplicates, silos, disorganization, and a lack of real governance across the board. On their own, each of these creates everyday friction inside the business. People waste time searching for the right versions. They double check things they shouldn't have to. They rebuild what's already exists somewhere else because they couldn't find it. But here's what changes the moment you introduce AI into that picture. AI doesn't just look at the stuff passively the way humans do. It pulls from it, it summarizes it, it recommends actions based on it. So if the underlying data is broken, AI scales the broken parts faster and with more confidence. First one on the list is that outdated data. This is information that used to be true at one point, but just isn't anymore. Those old price sheets we talked about, former employees still listed in the company directory, policies from 3 years ago, customer records that haven't been touched in 2 years, or even more. The AI risk here is simple, but it's also really serious. AI surfaces those old answers. It does it confidently with no warning at all. It doesn't know the policy was retired last year. It doesn't know the contact left the company in March. We had a client whose Copilot kept recommending people for projects. Sounded great, and the team was excited until they realized half the recommendations were people who had left the company. The HR records simply hadn't been updated in the right systems. That's the key. They're usually updated, maybe not across the right systems. So Copilot was confidently stamping projects with former employees. That's outdated data in action, and it happens more often than you think. Number 2 on the list is inaccurate data. This is information that's just plain wrong, even if it's current. Wrong customer contacts, incorrect revenue numbers, missing fields all over the records, statuses that haven't been updated since the deal originally closed. The AI risk here is poor recommendations and incorrect summaries handed up to leadership. And here's the dangerous part that most people miss. AI doesn't second guess the data. We talked about this before. People are going to second guess it. If your CRM system says the deal is open, AI is going to treat it as open. Treat it as open forever, even if it's closed 3 months ago. It doesn't pause and say, are you sure? It just answers quickly and with confidence. So if your data is wrong, your AI will be wrong faster, at scale, and with more polish than ever before. That is not a Copilot problem. That is not an AI problem. That is a data problem hiding underneath AI. Duplicate data. Multiple versions of the same things across systems, and none of them quite agree with each other. 3 CRM accounts for the same customer. 5 versions of the same proposal template floating around. The same contact in your system, your marketing tool, and your finance system, all slightly different in a small way. I can't tell you how often I've seen that specific use cases cause problems long before AI has even come into play. The AI risk, of course, is confusion in the answers, conflicting recommendations, and a lower trust over time as users notice. Here's exactly what happens in the real world. A user asks Copilot, what's our latest contract template? Copilot dutifully finds 3 versions. Picks one, shows it to the user, but it isn't the most recent one. The legal team revised it last month and they happen to save it in a different folder altogether. The user sends it off to a customer without thinking, and now you have a contract issue on your hands. Duplicates create that exact risk every single day, and most teams don't even know it's happening. I do want to call out, I understand the reasoning here. You have contacts with old versions. You don't want to remove it while you transition, but you need the new ones for new deals. It's still a risk, and there's still things we can do to support that. Copilot gave decent answers on, siloed data, and this one's big. So this information is trapped somewhere AI can't reach. Or worse, somewhere nobody knows to look for it. Finance data that lives in Excel files on somebody's laptop, sales notes buried inside a CRM that success teams can't see, or tribal knowledge sitting in old Teams chats, or even worse, locked away in somebody's head with no documentation at all. The AI risk here is incomplete answers, missing context, data made it without the full picture. We had a client whose customer success team kept asking Copilot for insight on at-risk accounts. Copilot gave very good answers on the surface, but it was missing something very significant. The sales team had detailed notes on every customer relationship. Risks, history, key contacts, sensitive data, all of it was there. But these were notes locked inside CRM, and their CRM wasn't integrated with the rest of the environment. So Copilot was confidently answering with half the picture, and nobody realized it for weeks. Once they connected the two systems, the answers got dramatically better almost overnight. That's the real cost of silos when you bring AI into the mix. Disorganized data, and this one's pretty universal. This is the one when information exists somewhere, but nobody can find it when they need it. Random files that mean nothing, no metadata, folder structure still in place from 2014, documents called final_real_final.doxt. Those are the ones that we all secretly have on our own drives. You know exactly what I'm talking about. We all do this. The AI risk is wasted time, lower usefulness, and frustrated users who give up on the tools. Because AI has to figure out what's in those files and what they mean for the business. If your file is called document 1, AI has to read the whole thing to know what's in it. If it's labeled, tagged, and structured properly, AI knows what's looking for immediately. The same content, two different containers, wildly different results. This is honestly one of the easiest problems to fix, and it pays off probably one of the fastest once you get started. Ungoverned data. So this is the big one, and honestly, the scariest one of all 6 for most organizations. So this one has no clear owner, no permissions anywhere, no retention rules in place, no real stewardship behind the scenes. The AI risk here is oversharing, compliance exposure, and a real loss of confidence in AI overall once something leaks. Here's what we see all the time in almost every assessment that we do. Someone has created a SharePoint site 5 years ago for a project that mattered at the time. They open it up to everyone in the company. That way the team could move fast and they didn't have to deal with permissions. Then they forgot about it once the project was over with. They started utilizing it for other areas. 5 years later, that site has the salary spreadsheet on it, M&A planning doc, or even customer churn analysis from last quarter. And it's still wide open to everyone in the company with no controls into place. Without Copilot, nobody ever finds it. It's buried under thousands of other files. But with Copilot, somebody asks an innocent sounding question, and there it is right at the top of the answer with a confident summary of everything you didn't want them to know. That's oversharing problem in a nutshell, and it's a real one. It exists long before AI came along. AI just made it very suddenly, painfully visible. Now I want to zoom out for a second and reset the conversation a bit, because this isn't a technical problem buried in IT. It's a serious business problem with real money attached. Just looking at the numbers from the experts, Gartner predicts 60% of AI projects are going to fail outright. And the reason they cite is lack of AI-ready data. 60%. That's not a small figure rate or a rounding error. That is a clear majority of projects. IBM has done their own independent research on the same topic, and they report that more than 25% of organizations lose over $5 million every single year because of poor data quality. $5 million every year just from bad data sitting in their systems. Now, if you think about that in the context of your AI investment, you're spending real money on licensing, training, change management, strategy, and rollout. And the foundation underneath of all of that is the data that's already costing you $5 million even before AI shows up. That's not back office housekeeping. That's not an IT chore. It's risk, it's wasted spend, and it's missed ROI on every dollar you're putting into AI. So we've spent a lot of time talking about what bad looks like. Let's flip the conversation. What does AI ready data really mean in practical terms? It's a lot more simple than most people think when they hear the phrase. AI ready data is data that is reliable, findable, and governable. So that AI can deliver trusted results confidently. 3 words: reliable, findable, governable. And here's the most important thing. AI doesn't need to be perfect data to deliver the value. It needs information your business can trust. Trust is the bar we're aiming for, not perfection, not completeness, not flawlessness. Trust is a much more achievable goal for an organization willing to put into the work. So what makes AI ready in practice? We break it down into 7 core data disciplines. They each sit underneath one of those 3 pillars. Each discipline rolls up cleanly to one of those 3 pillars, just as you saw. We're going to walk through them now together, but I want to focus less on what should IT do here and more on what should I be asking as a leader. Because if you're a business leader watching this today, you don't have to clean the data yourself, but you absolutely have the right to ask the questions of the people who can. First pillar is reliable. AI needs information that businesses can trust without second guessing. If customer records are duplicated, content is outdated, or reporting is inconsistent across the systems, AI gets harder and harder to trust over time. And once that trust slips with your users, it's really hard to win it back. We worked with a sales organization that rolled out Copilot for their sellers. The first 2 weeks went great. Sellers loved it, told everyone how great it was. By week 4, they had quietly stopped using it almost completely. Why? Because Copilot kept summarizing the wrong account information in their pipeline reviews. 2 divisions had created their own versions of the same customers in CRM years before. Copilot pulled both versions at the same time. The summaries were a complete mess. Sellers shrugged, gave up, and went straight back to their old habits and spreadsheets. Some even went to use outside AI solutions. They put customer and company information into non-secure AI solutions to get what they want. Now you've got all kinds of problems. But that's a reliability problem in a nutshell. One bad experience kills adoption faster than anything else. So as a leader, here are the questions you need to start asking inside your organization. Who owns data quality today, and is anyone accountable for it? Which records are most critical to AI success in our environment? What matters today? Where are duplicates or inconsistencies creating real friction for our teams already? Do we have clear accountability in place to keep it moving? You don't need to clean the data yourself. That is not the expectation. You just need to make sure the protocols exist to keep it trustworthy over time. Findable. AI can only ever use what it can find inside your environment. It sounds obvious when you say it, but it's exactly where many organizations get stuck. When information is buried, siloed, disconnected, or just poorly organized, AI gets less useful by the day. Your employees go right back to wasting time searching for things they know exist somewhere. We've all been there at some point. You know the answer exists somewhere in your company. Maybe in an email from last quarter, maybe in a Teams chat, in somebody else's Teams chat, maybe in a SharePoint site you don't remember the name of. You spend 20 minutes hunting for it before giving up and just recreate it. That's the exact problem AI runs into when it tries to help. If your knowledge is locked inside somebody's inbox, it might as well not exist for AI purposes. If your project history lives in someone else's Teams chat from 6 months ago, AI can't find it and can't help. So here's what leaders should be asking on the findability side. Can our employees find critical information quickly when they need it? Is key knowledge trapped inside inboxes or disconnected systems we didn't even think about? Are we relying on tribal knowledge instead of shared, documented knowledge? Who owns improving findability across the business as a whole? Again, you don't need to organize every file yourself, and you shouldn't even try. You just need to make sure information can be found and used by both people and AI. The final pillar is governable. This one is about ownership and active governance. It's about establishing clear accountability, real standards, and decision rights for managing data responsibly across the organization. Without those things in place, AI introduces real risk into the environment, and it slows your transformation down significantly. Here's the thing about governance that nobody likes to admit. Most organizations technically have a governance policy already. It lives in a PDF somewhere on the legal team's drive. Governance has to live in a daily decisions people are making. The permissions, the retention rules, the approval workflows. Every piece has to have a real owner and who's accountable. So ask yourself these questions as you walk back into your organization. Who owns our AI-related data and content risks today by name? Are our permissions aligned to real business needs, or did everyone just get access to everything because it was easier at the time? Do we know what should be retained, archived, or removed from our systems? And do we have governance that lives beyond just a policy document on a shelf? No one needs to own every permission themselves, and that's not the goal. You need to make sure responsible controls exist in practice and not just paper. That's the leader's job of it all. Making sure someone owns it, making sure it's real. So how can Microsoft help? In a huge way, and who is better to answer that question? I'm going to pass it over to Tracy, and she can go through how Microsoft can help and the tools that support.
Thank you, Tracy. Hi, everyone, and thank you, C5, for the invite. I appreciate it, the time. Yeah, we're going to go into some of the challenges that we're seeing organizations face when they're adopting AI applications and how Microsoft addresses those concerns. First, of course, we see a concern of a lack of controls to protect sensitive data. So leaders are citing that the leakage of sensitive data is their primary concern when adopting AI. Another large concern is that AI users, as Tracy mentioned, are bringing their own AI to work. If they're not getting what they want, they're bringing their own AI, or what we would call BYO AI. And that means that they may be using things like ChatGPT or Claude, which are not managed by your IT organization. And again, you don't have the security around those things. So again, a big concern. There's a lack of visibility or concern thereof of what, when AI apps start to increase in your environment, then what are the new vulnerabilities? So we know that 60% of customers are building and testing their own AI applications. And as a result, there's new vulnerabilities that emerge. And we need to be able to identify things like direct prompt injections and those types of threats. So then, of course, finally, there is regulatory pressure. So governments worldwide are recognizing the potential risks associated with AI technologies, but they also realize the benefit of society. So there's new regulatory landscape is continuing to evolve, and leaders feel that there's a lack of understanding of how AI is going to be regulated in the future. And this is where we're going to jump in and kind of talk about how Microsoft, like I said, is addressing those concerns and what's going on today with your current subscriptions. So foundational AI commitments. Basically, this is what is the foundation of the commitments that you have through Microsoft and your data. So we'll talk about what those mean and what they are kind of out of the box when we talk about your data in your tenant and the foundational trust you have with your Microsoft subscriptions. So the foundation of trust has been built through those commitments with protection controls and enterprise data security, all of these things that are contractual with our customers. So these same commitments apply to your Copilot prompts and responses in M365 Copilot and Copilot Chat. What that means is that if you are logged into your Entra intra-tenant, meaning you have a username and a unique identifier and a password, and you're utilizing either a paid subscription from M365 Copilot, or you're using the browser-based chat. If you are logged into your Microsoft account, you are behind your enterprise data protected security. And what does that really mean? So that means that we secure your data at rest and in transit with encryption. Besides the encryption of the data, there is physical security controls, just like with the rest of your data, and we have data isolation in between your tenants. So everything is kind of inside of that service boundary that you, within your tenant, all of your services lie in there, the enterprise data protection layer. And that's true of Copilot as well. So when it reaches the LLM and when it goes out to ground the information, all of that is remaining inside of your enterprise data protected layers. You control your data. And what does that mean? Well, this is time tested of how our commitment to you, that your data is your data that you put in the cloud and you control that data. It is not our data control. We guarantee that those commitments are that it is your data. And so not only is it your data to manage and control, and only you have access to that information, but we never use that information to train any of the foundational models or to enrich any of the other LLMs. So prompts, again, responses, agent usage, web queries, all of these things are inside of this foundational trust model that we're talking about. I mentioned earlier about some of the things like prompt injections and those concerns. You also have protected AI security, copyright risks. So these safeguards are behind harmful content, prompt injections, and any copyright concerns. Again, all of these things are within those enterprise trusted boundaries that is contractually committed. But it also then has responsible AI embedded. So there's a lot of things like that when you're concerned about that harmful content or employees utilizing it in a harmful manner. Those things are all within those foundational commitments that I'm talking about here. So there is definitely a full enterprise data protection just regarding Copilot and the rest of your data links within the Microsoft Learn documentation. So if there's questions there, definitely check that out. The Copilot Control System. This is how you're going to manage, it's a set of tools within the Admin Center for IT professionals to understand and manage AI within your organization. And it's really comprised of 3 pillars. So first you have security and governance. This is the data that we're talking about that's secure within your trust boundary, and it's ensuring compliancy and protection at every level that you have created with your content. Second is the management controls. So obviously technology empowers people to create what they need to do to work, but as IT, we need the controls to help manage AI sprawl within the company and have visibility into that. So with these management and control tools in Copilot, you can make sure that the right people have access to the right tools and they're using them as intended. And then the management and reporting within the Copilot ecosystem basically helps you understand and track usage, adoption, things like business impact, Copilot and agents. So we call this Copilot Analytics. You have analytic reporting, you have visibility into dashboards of usage, all the way down to ROI based on productivity. So all of these things are kind of the pillars of the control systems that you have access to out of the box, so you're able to manage this type of thing. So really the bottom line is that AI doesn't have to feel like a black box that you can't see inside of. With the control systems in place in Microsoft 365, it's really giving IT the transparency and the control so that organizations can scale Copilot and make sure that it is set up in a secure and strategic manner. And these are all things, again, that you have access to. You have role-based access to these controls within IT. So I want to talk about the relationship between these security settings and permissions from your Purview and your Copilot. Copilot is my AI assistant, and it's inheriting the permissions that I have, my existing permissions. So there's a lot of concerns of Copilot finding this data that's, there's two kind of levels here. There's the outdated data, the duplicate data that Tracy talked about, all of that sort of chaotic items, but there's also the concern of just, well, what do I have access to? So obviously, it's a lot harder for me to know that exactly on my own, but with a Copilot as my assistant, Copilot will definitely find that. So it's honoring your existing permissions, though. So if you have your labels set up, if you have your DLP policy set up, these are the things that Copilot out of the box respects and follows and inherits those permissions from the user. So my AI assistant has my permissions, has my any risk policies and things like that are associated with me. My Copilot will inherit. So that's out of the box, and it's very important to understand that that's how this cleaning up of data will help you so much within the Copilot ecosystem and that user way of handling Copilot, as well as addressing those oversharing concerns within the platform. You have access to SharePoint Advanced Management, lifecycle management, a lot of these things with the visibility, again, to how to be able to have a view of where all of these oversharing concerns might be. So definitely check that out. But, the lesson here really is that your data is your data. And if you are governing that data and you are setting up lifecycle management and you have those controls set up, then Copilot's going to respect those things. And again, trying to just make sure that there's an understanding that Microsoft is trying to help you protect everything that you can and giving you the controls to do that so that Copilot can work the most efficiently that it can while remaining secure for yourself, your organization, and your users. But all of that comes with the foundation, right? So having this information available to you, setting up your security labels, setting up this lifecycle management to keep everything clean is really how Copilot is going to, because it's taking on the permissions of the user, that's where you have that really solid sort of foundation of everything. And then finally, just really quickly, wanted to go over Agent 365. You may have heard of this. I think it was just released on Monday. When we talk about these same sort of inheritance, security, permissions, and policies information barriers that you are giving your users who have access to your organizational data, we need to also discuss the reality that agents are joining our workforce, and agents too will have access to documentation. They'll have things that you may need to consider when it comes to what permissions they have, as well as things like conditional access. Should this agent run on a mobile device? Should this agent have access based on what IP it's running off of? So these are things that you think about within Purview and users, and this is where Agent 365 comes in, where you can address the agent as a user and be sure that those permissions and access policies and things are in place for your agents, because it's not a very distant future thing that agents are being built. They have job descriptions, they have knowledge sources, they have tools that they're given to get the job done. And really, it's important to also understand that agents are going to be needed to be securely managed, just like you securely manage your users and the access to what they have. So that's where Agent 365 comes in. So I just wanted to bring that up because you'll be seeing that probably quite a bit, and happy to answer questions on that. But with that, I am going to hand it back to Tracy. I appreciate your time.
There we go. Unmute. Thank you, Tracy. The one thing I do want to call out before we move on is some of this is you are going to have to build yourself, right? The policies and what you're doing. But Microsoft is trying to its best and its hardest to give you the tools to really be successful with it. And they aren't additional things that you have to do. And it's for everyone. So like she said, some of it is for the IT to really look at it, but it's down by, different levels and users so they can see what they have access to. So the managers can see what their reps have access to. And they're giving that across the board and trying to make it as easy as possible to be successful with AI and with Copilot. So I want to look at it, everything we've kind of talked about as companies are rolling out AI, most companies are still thinking of that ready, aim, fire. It's built the perfect strategy, plan everything, launch it. It feels safe. It feels disciplined. And to be honest, after everything we talked about today, you're probably thinking the same thing. But as I mentioned at the very beginning, you don't need perfection to get started. Data readiness is just part of the plan. It just needs to be part of the plan from the beginning. So in our experience, organizations that actually succeed with AI has flipped it. They go fire, aim, ready, fire. So first, they're going to fire, experiment fast, run small pilots, get started with AI, utilize the functionality that's given to you by just purchasing the basic Microsoft licenses. They're going to learn lessons quickly. Then they aim. They take what's worked, what didn't, what surprised them, and then they can get ready. Then they build their strategy, their roadmap with real data, not just theory. You'll know what's working, what doesn't work. That's when you can really fire again, and they can scale what works, and they can scale it fast. The key here is intelligent failure, not avoidable failure. Intelligent failure is when you try something small, it doesn't work, and you learn. Avoidable failure is when you skip the small experiments, go big, discover those small problems in production. So here's a real example of somebody that we worked with. They had a big project, big plan for a finance team. Instead, we ran a 2-week experiment with a small team. The agent failed in very interesting ways. It turned out the financial data was structured for humans, not AI. If they built that big version first, they would have had a 6-month embarrassment instead of 2 weeks of intelligent failure that saved them. One more thing about this framework, there's no one-size-fits-all sequence. Different organizations move differently. Different parts of your business are at different stages. That's okay. The point is just start moving. Once you start, the next question is, how do you sustain it? The companies moving fastest are continuing with that continuous cycle. They build a center of excellence. That center of excellence is going to drive 4 things continuously: strategy and planning, continuous adoption, training and support, and continuous governance and monitoring. The word that matters here is continuous. AI is not a project. It's a capability. It's a muscle in the organization that keeps developing. So the practical view is first 30 days of adoption are actually very easy. You identify your use cases, run training, host the expert clinics. People are excited. The hard part is that next 330 days, keeping that momentum, building more advanced agents, deepening usage, growing capability. That's where most organizations are beginning to stall. They get past launch. Once excitement fades, nothing replaces it. I can't tell you how many POVs we've gone through. And at the final stage, when we get feedback, it's always, when is our next training? How do I keep training? How do I keep going with this, with everything new, with keeping the momentum, keep understanding it? That continuous piece is very, very important. The Center of Excellence will replace that. It's the team that keeps the flywheel turning. What we've seen is companies that with a Center of Excellence will expand AI usage across the organization. Companies without one peak in month 3 and plateau. If you take one thing from this, make it this: the biggest mistake is treating AI like a software rollout. It's not. it's going to change how the people will work. Many knowledge workers will see 30 to 50% of their tasks automated or augmented in the next few years. It's not a software change, that's a work change. The organizations that succeed focus less on tools, more on culture, and more on experimentation. The question isn't, will AI work? The question is, how fast will we learn from it? Last thing I want to leave you with is we put together a 25-question data readiness checklist. It's a Copilot data security checklist, 25 targeted questions you can use to assess whether your organization's data is actually ready for AI. Why does it matter? Big ID did some research in 2025. They found that 93% of organizations don't have full confidence in securing AI-driven data. So you're not alone if you're feeling a little unsure. The checklist gives you a way to start. We walk through the questions with your IT team, your security team, your data owners. Use it to find the gaps, prioritize them. It turns AI readiness from abstract to concrete to-do list. We'll send this out to everyone, all the registrants after the webinar, so keep an eye on your inbox. It'll be right there. With that, I am going to pass it over to Haley, and she will get us started on the last couple of things and into our Q&A.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so before we jump into Q&A, I just want to make sure that everyone knows about Community Summit North America coming up in October. So if you're responsible for Dynamics 365, Power Platform, or Copilot, any Microsoft business applications, this is really one of the best opportunities to step out of your day-to-day execution and role and to spend time learning from experts and peers who are solving the same problems that you are on a day-to-day basis. So we'll be there, and we're sharing this discount code C5Insight15 to make it easier for you to join us. So we hope to see you there. Now to jump into the Q&A portion of today's webinar with our experts. So I have a question for Tracy Urbina. You cited that 80% of leaders are concerned about sensitive data leakage, and we covered a lot of best practices and things to do and situations that may be very relevant to where people are currently in their digital workplace governance. It can be hard to know where to start. Can you give attendees one thing that they should set up in Purview to start protecting their sensitive data with Copilot today?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to, understanding that Copilot does honor existing permissions. So, the first thing that should be considered, something that's, we want quick wins, we want easy things to do. So, setting up your sensitivity labels and your data loss prevention policies, because those labels are going to carry forward into Copilot responses through the label inheritance, through when you are making version changes, when you are sending that documentation over email. Those things are really important so that you still have the security, but then Copilot's going to respect those things, and it's a pretty quick win to be able to do that, whether that is a manual labeling for sensitivity or you utilize the automatic labeling, which of course is much easier and faster. But those are the things I would suggest do first.
Thanks for that. So Traci Winter, in a similar vein here, you gave leaders a lot to think about throughout this webinar and gave questions to ask their IT teams, and the checklist will be another resource that they can tangibly download and use with their teams to work through some of this. But how do organizations prioritize which data to clean up first? It's overwhelming to think about doing it all at once when you consider a digital workplace overall. So what would you recommend prioritizing when the AI transformation journey starts?
So start with the data closest to your high value AI use cases. So if you are starting your first pilot or you're starting them with the sales team, focus on your CRM records, focus on the content, the information that they're using. So that way you can make sure that as they are continuing to utilize and your value is going, they're going to see that clean data. It's going to fill in your AI scenarios that you're launching first, and then you can expand from there. So start with first the individuals, and then the content that they use the most, or the content that they are going to be utilizing right away. Don't look at everything within even that department or even those individuals, because you're still going to have that what comes first. So start with the most important and within those, and then you can expand.
Great. So I'm going to send this back to Tracy Urbina. With Agent 365 just coming out on Monday, I think there's a lot of excitement around it. There's a lot of capabilities that it has, especially as organizations are experimenting with agentic AI. So can you go into a little bit more about how Agent 365 helps organizations start deploying more AI agents at scale in a governed manner?
Yeah, sure. So again, I think that it's interesting to think about, deploying at scale. When we think about what scale actually is, it's the controls over how we're managing the group of what we're doing, right? So, if we are looking to scale a deployment of a solution for employees, we want to have almost like packages ready to go. And with Agent 365, that's what we're doing. We're allowing the permissions and policies and the things that we can set up for and conditions for agents, and scaling our agents just like we scale our people with packages of licensing and permission policies and those things. So the ability to have the control plane of agents is really where that comes into play. It's securing your agents and giving them the proper setup and policies that they need to be successful. Again, just like you would have your users. So that's where the scale portion of that comes in with the control plane of Agent 365.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. So, Traci Winter, I feel like you probably handle these questions a lot, but when it comes to approaching leadership, maybe somebody is attending the webinar who's not a leader, they're an influencer, and they are ready to go with AI, but they understand that it starts with data readiness. How do they convince leadership to invest in data readiness and doing all of this background work when leaders really just want to see the ROI of AI right now? How would you kind of coach them through that?
So it's a little bit of both the get started on some of the things, and you'll be able to see the accuracy versus inaccuracy in a small scale. So sometimes you will just need to start there. The other parts are really focus on those risk numbers that we had talked about earlier. The 60% of AI projects that fail versus the, as well as the $8 million lost in a year. The other side and flip side of that is look at the case studies where leaders are engaged, where they're leading the charge. I can't tell you how many organizations we've worked with where the leaders were forefront in the training, in the development, in the engagement, and push across the board with both readiness as well as getting started. And the ROI is astronomically different. As long as leadership is behind both sides of the engagement and readiness, as well as the AI starting.
Yeah, I think having leadership involved is a huge factor in success for sure that we've seen at C5. So Tracy, Urbina, there are employees, we talked a little bit about shadow AI, but I think ChatGPT is probably a common alternative to Copilot, and there are maybe some leaders that are worried about employees using shadow AI or ChatGPT, other outside AI tools, essentially, before maybe they get this data readiness under control or before they even experiment or pilot Copilot, what would you tell those leaders who are worried about third-party AI tools being used in their organization?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things, because it's important to know that there are tools available within Purview to look for shadow AI tools being used, applications. That is something that I would say to check into. However, more importantly is that data is not secured. We can't tell you what's, how it's being handled or managed. So visibility into it is fantastic. Run those tools, see what's going on. However, in the interim, do some of the governance and security settings within your DLP policies so that you can set up so that end users are not unable to log into those things, so you can keep your data within your Microsoft tenant. Now, it's really important to understand, though, that Copilot has those modalities available to users. So if they want to use Claude, they can use Copilot and choose Claude as a model. And if they want to use ChatGPT, there's models within there too. So we're not taking away those capabilities, it's just the applications that we can't control the data that's going through there. So it is really best to understand where those things are, and then utilize the connectors and the subprocessors that are available to you in the tenant that do remain behind your enterprise data protection, rather than allowing those applications separately. But you do have visibility in the Purview Center with some of those advanced security steps. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks. So I have another question coming in here from Jeffrey. You've emphasized that Copilot is only as good as the data behind it. In most enterprises, that data lives across many SharePoint sites and libraries. Retention labels cover compliance, but not content quality or usability. From an implementation standpoint, what data preparation approaches have you seen actually make the biggest difference for Copilot outcomes at scale?
So I can take that. So Copilot is going to perform better when it has a clear signal about which content should be trusted. So first, clarify, not just retain the content. So promoting authoritative libraries for policies, standards, templates, core knowledge. So focusing on those, reducing that competing version of the same document across sites. Next, probably focusing more on like the architecture improvements. We talked about that final whatever of the documents, making sure that you're using actual high value metadata fields across it, cleaning up that library scoping. I will give you a really fast use case. I personally created a agent once. It was a great agent. I loved it. I used it. It pointed to a SharePoint site and it grabbed random documents for me, because the one I had pointed to was a site that I just put random documents into. They didn't have metadata, so it wasn't pulling accurately, right? So focus on making sure the metadata, similar to what Tracy, not only focuses on the security side, but also focuses on that reliability side. And then the third is focus on just the most active 20%. Just start there. Focus on those and don't focus on like the greater. So identify the most accessed libraries, documents, archive your restricted and everything, get those out of there. And then the final would be permission clarity, edge trimming, making sure to clean up those broken inheritance where it's unnecessary. Those we just get moving. I don't know who's going to work on this project, so let's just give it to everybody pieces. Those are going to be the biggest ones. So focusing on those three is your top ones.
Thanks for such a thorough answer there. Okay, so we are about 5 minutes ish to the hour, and I want to make sure that we give people some time back into their work days before 2 p.m. Eastern, I guess, appointments come calling. So I want to thank Tracy Urbina for joining us, and thanks to all of our attendees for spending part of your afternoon with us. We hope that this was an insightful webinar for you and that you join us at our next webinar on Copilot ROI on May 21st.